RVing in the 21st century has been profoundly impacted by one huge force, the website rvtravel.com. And the force behind RV travel is Chuck Woodbury, a legend in the industry. To understand Chuck is to understand RVing, and that's why I'm so excited that he agreed to join me for a recent interview. So sit down, grab a hot or cold beverage, and join me for a discussion with the original RV traveling man. Now, Chuck, when did you originally start traveling around by RV when you were young? Now, you were kind of a pioneer of this, at least out on the West Coast. Isn't that correct?
Well, I bought my first motorhome when I was 33 or 34. And I decided I would go write magazine articles, earn a living, be on the road reporter. I idolized Charles Kuralt and CBS, and Charles Hillinger, who was syndicated with the LA Times. He was their roving reporter, and he was in about 400 newspapers, and I just loved his stuff. And so I just wanted to go out and travel. I kept a journal for 10 years in my 30s. Oh my God, my story, I could go on forever.
Kind of the romance of the road, was that sort of the idea there? Yeah.
Drifting, just drifting around and stumbling upon stories. Having that little house on with me, that was always my dream. It was never a travel trailer. It was always just a small motorhome that I could walk in the back, and there was my house. And I had started off with a typewriter. I had a little portable black and white darkroom that I'd set up, and I took my processed my film, my Tri-X, and at first I just sent stories to magazines and newspapers. I would go out to newspaper recycling bins wherever I was. I'd pull off and I'd go in and I'd grab a big stack of newspapers and boil a pot of coffee, and I'd start going through all the local newspapers and find leads for stories. And I bought every little newspaper I could, but I would find stories that way, just, oh, look at this. And so that was my good way to go into a town and find out what was going on.
Now, was this all Pacific Northwest, Chuck, or where was the location here?
The West, anywhere in the West. I was living in Sacramento, California. So I'd go as east as Colorado and come up to the Northwest, go down to Arizona and New Mexico. And so that was really pretty easy to cover all that. And I loved it out there anyway. I loved the West. And
you were getting paid then essentially to travel and to write. I mean, that's like a lifestyle a lot of people would really love to have, and you were living it, weren't you?
I think the longest I ever went out was 4.5 months. This ad agency that I hooked up with, that we found each other in, and through them, I worked on special sporting events like bicycle races and motocrosses, and I would do the publicity and publish the program. And but yeah, I spent a third of my time on traveling, and I loved it. It was just wonderful. Late 1980s that I started out west, my on the road newspaper. There was no YouTube, there was no Facebook, right. There was no internet. I said that when I felt connected, it was because there was a phone booth within walking distance that was being connected. No television most of the time, maybe some radio, but no, I was by myself, and start off with a manual typewriter and a dark room. And then the Macintosh came around, and a little portable printer and battery powered printer. And hey, that was a whole new ball game. Writing became fun instead of a chore with a typewriter. I never really made enough money to live off my magazine and newspaper stuff, but I certainly learned a lot, learned how to write, and learned what a story was and what a story wasn't, and all that.
So let me ask you, you did this freelancing for a while. When did you start RV travel as an idea? How long ago was that? Was that when you were still traveling around, or was that more of an internet-led thing?
I started in college in charge of the student newspaper, which I turned into a daily from 2 days a week, and bought all the composition equipment. That's when I learned. From my dorm room, I built up a newspaper composition building, had as many as 12 employees. This is when I was 22 or 23. And then I started a rock and roll magazine with a buddy of mine, and burned through everything, lost my original business, which was thriving. And then I was 30 years old, and that's when I started freelancing. I learned all about publishing. I learned how you don't publish, and all of those principles still applied today. So that was the beginning. And then from there, when I was 30, after losing my business, sold it and just basically got my money out of it. So then when I'm about 30, then I that's when I decided I would be a writer and go travel. And I found this little $8,500 18-foot motorhome where it broke down every other trip and it leaked every trip and dripped on me. But I loved it anyway. And I just wasn't smart. I mean, this thing had brown stains all over the ceiling. I didn't even think twice.
Yeah.
I was totally ignorant about the whole thing. So then I started Out West, and Out West was a quarterly tabloid. This would have been in 1988 or 89, I can't remember. And basically what I did is I traveled around, I gathered my stories. I had just bought the Macintosh and a laser printer. And I would go home to Sacramento, and I would, after a trip, and I would take all my stories and put them together, have them printed, sent it out. And I got tons of publicity starting off. After that first issue, ABC News got, the USA Today did a really nice review of it. And again, I was just some small time guy. I didn't any.
How did you sell it, Chuck? How did you get people to even know it was there and to want to subscribe? What kind of methods did you use for distribution?
I sent out one press release to a that I wrote. It came from my PR background that I had by that point. And and it was picked up by little papers. And then a producer at ABC News saw that. And so they put me on the evening news. 22 million people saw that. That's when the evening news was big. That got me phone calls from agents. It got me a book contract right away in a $20,000 advance, which was a huge amount of money to me at the time. Then I was the Today Show. CBS News flew me to Washington, D.C. to be on the Charlie Rose Show, which was then on CBS Late Night. It was People Magazine came a little later. They did 2 pages on me. Put my picture on the contents page. It was huge.
Nowadays we call that going viral. I mean, viral. That's amazing, isn't it? Yeah.
It was. It didn't stop. I did radio interviews from the road, and I played it up. Here I am out here in these little podunk towns in a phone booth. And I didn't realize, Keith, that when I started this, I was very naive, and I didn't realize why that this was so attractive to the media, was that I was living all of their lives. They had editors, they were assigned stories. I could pick my own stories. I could interview flaggers along the highway and come away with a story, and they all just thought that was the funniest thing. So they all wanted to meet me, and so I had these big time people come along with me. And of course, when they're with you for 2 or 3 days, you get to pick their brains, and so that's what I did. And
you weren't really covering news, were you? I mean, you were writing about lifestyles, cultures, and places, the kind of stuff that small town America is really made of. I mean, it seems like that was what attracted them.
It was what it was. I wrote about anything that interests me, and I offbeat 1 minute. It almost looked like the design of it almost looked like the National Enquirer. It was just meant to be offbeat, weird, funny, hokey. And then I kept what I call a roadside journal, which I still use that today. But it was simply at night I would pop a couple beers and sit down at my computer, and I would write whatever I experienced, conversations I overheard, museums I went to, and that I found the world's largest hairball, and things, offbeat, and then I'd be serious. One reporter later on, after the internet started, he called me America's first blogger, because essentially I was blogging every day. Every day I wrote. I just couldn't, there was no internet. So I just, then quarterly, I ran all this, in this 24 to 32 page tabloid. Then I got a call. I think probably a guy called me and introduced himself as an avid reader in New York. And he asked me if I'd like a larger audience. And as we talked, and I said, well, sure. Well, his name was John Brewer, and he was the president and editor in chief of the New York Times Syndicate, which is the largest tech syndicate in the world.
Wow.
Probably still is. I had a contract on my desk the next day, and for I think the next 6 years, whatever I sent them went out on their wire,
That's
special interest wire.
so people were just responding. I mean, you were writing, like you said, you were writing what you wanted. You weren't following trends. It was like, well, this interests me, so maybe it interests other people, and it seemed to work out that way, didn't it?
Yeah, I kept a personal journal through my 20s, and that's where I learned to write. Just because I learned that when you write for yourself, sooner or later you learn how to be honest. Because even though you might think nobody's going to look at it, you still want to. There's still something that nags at you. What if somebody sees this? So it's hard to be honest. You break up with a girlfriend and say, "Oh, she's the greatest thing in the world. How's my life going to be without her?" And then 6 months later, go back and you go, "Oh my God, who are you kidding?" um, so that gave me my style. That's where I learned to write in a first person.
Would you call it folksy? Well, would that be an
Yeah,
accurate?
yeah, folksy. Yeah, that was what a lot of people called it.
So how did that lead then to RV Travel? You were syndicated by the New York Times and you were publishing regularly. Did it naturally evolve from there, or what happened next?
I met a writer a couple of years in. She was editing a magazine in Boston, and a travel magazine for a travel company. And she wanted to know if I wanted to do a column. And I said, oh, she had seen me on the Today Show. And I said, no, I can't, I'm too busy. But then she was going to be in Seattle, and I was going to be in Seattle doing a radio interview at the same day. So we met up and had coffee, or I guess we had Mexican food, and hit it off. And she told me her magazine plug had been pulled. So I said, well, why don't you come on a trip with me? Another writer, attractive. And she did. And a couple of years later, we were married. And then Emily came along, who's now the editor of RV Travel. And well, that really cramped my style. I mean, you can't be this guy on the road out there having this when you're changing diapers. It just ruined the image, and I couldn't go out. I hated leaving Emily, and it just wasn't fun anymore. Circulation went way down, and then the internet appeared, and I had back then. RVing was simply grandma and grandpa's playhouse. We're spending our children's inheritance. It was old folks and their pink poodles, and my group, the baby boomers, they were still out backpacking, and RVing was very uncool. But I had learned about it through traveling with this RV. And out west, I never wrote about RVing, or at least very little. It was mostly just about the road.
So you were unhappy then because you had a daughter, and you were less satisfied, it seemed like, with what you were doing.
And I was going in the hole bad. I was losing money. I mean, it got bad. I had to pay my publishing bills and buy stamps on credit cards, and I couldn't go. I couldn't do the publicity. My writing was forced, so circulation went from 10,000 down to a few thousand.
Wow.
And then the internet came along, and I thought, this is good. This is going to be something. So I started rvbookstore.com. That's how it all started.
What was the time frame here that you started rvbookstore.com?
97, probably, the bookstore.
And you were selling RV related books online?
Oh, yeah, that's all in the end, we had 3,000 square foot warehouse filled with RV, every RV book we could get our hands on. And nobody had as many as we did. We had to build a very good website. It was very efficient, and we were doing really well. Then in 2001, I started RV Travel as a way to build a mailing list to sell books.
Was RV Travel kind of a phenomenon from the beginning, or did you have to build the audience up over a period of years?
What happened was all of my publishing skills came to play at that point. Circulation, I'd worn every hat at that point.
Right.
And what happened is that pay-per-click advertising was just starting. Penny a click. I spent $30 the first month on advertising RV travel. Well, I'll be darned if I didn't make 60, I made $60 back or something. This is when I really just started. So the next month I spent $60 and I made $120. Next month I spent 120, I made $240. I just kept going.
Wow.
And I was spending, I think, as I recall, 70, 80,000 that year on pay-per-click, but my subscriptions went just shot up. And that's how you can't do that now. It's going to cost you $1 a click or whatever.
Right.
So I was there. I hit it at the right time. That's how I built it up. And then my concentration was on building a mailing list, not relying on Google. So to this day, we don't really have to rely on Google and write for Google like everybody else. We can write for ourselves and just try to build our mailing list, which is close to 100,000 right now. So
wow,
it's still growing. It's gone up and down.
Yeah. But and now it has become, I mean, RV travel, isn't it the leading or pretty close to the leading RV related website on the whole internet? Isn't that correct?
Single site, probably the largest.
It seems like also to me that again, you sort of follow the beat of your own drummer. Like you said, you didn't engage in what you were referring to as SEO, search engine optimization. You and your staff now, which is decent size, you kind of write what interests you. You kind of write what interests the community. You're not chasing, page views or anything like that. And because you don't, it seems like people recognize that you're writing for the audience, and they seem to be responding. Do you think that's an accurate assessment?
Yeah, I think that we're honest.
You're fearless too. I mean, you take on the industry when you need to. You're not just writing for advertisers, right?
We're not dependent on advertising. But we have increasingly, probably about 5% of our audience, 6% has donated at one time or another. Some of them donate every month. And because you're on Substack, I know that you are dealing with that too. But that's called a freemium in advertising lingo, and generally about 4% will buy something that they can get for free. They will give money. So we're doing pretty well on that. It keeps growing.
Well, let me ask you related to that, Chuck, then. Why do you hear one thing consistently for why people keep coming to your site, why it's so popular? I don't know kind of what the run of opinion that attracts such a huge, following to the site.
I think they just find it interesting. An article is over on one side is informational, educational, and the other side it's entertainment. And you've got to be somewhere in there. You can be mostly entertainment or mostly educational, and then the quality of the writing matters. You can write about anything. My essay for Sunday is about a bench at a elementary school. And I mixed it in with the news about the submarine and how depressing the news can be. And yet here's this little tidbit about this little red bench at an elementary school that turns out is the only red bench in the school. And it's for kids that are having a bad day or depressed or down or lonely. They sit on the red bench, and the other kids one of them can come over and sit with them and join them. And it's just a sweet little story. A buddy of mine told me years ago, who published a chain of senior citizen newspapers, said, people are seniors, but they're also people. And RVers are RVers, but they're also people. You go around, sit around a campfire with a bunch of RVers at an RV park. They don't talk about dumping their holding tanks and air pressure. They talk about their grandkids and their aches and pains and everything. So it's we write to the common denominator of it's an older crowd, 55, 60 plus. No intention of going after those van people that are in their 20s that are going to burn out on that anyway.
Chuck, what they're getting from your site, it seems to me, with the story you just talked about, is a perfect example. They're just getting stuff that they're not getting elsewhere, right? You're writing stuff that other people aren't writing. So in that way, it almost feels like you have a niche to yourself. I mean, the YouTube channels you reference, there's kind of a template, and you've seen it, and I've seen it.
Yeah. Oh,
The
yeah.
kind of things you have to do, anything with a list, and those things can be useful. But you're also giving them something that touches them and that they simply are not getting elsewhere, for the people that are so SEO focused and click focused that they can't see beyond, that kind of a thing, it seems to me.
You're right. You can't be a content creator and write something and just look at keywords. And of course, now with AI, you can crank out a perfectly good article. And if you're not knowledgeable about RVing, stuff's gonna get by that's wrong. But if 90% of the people are never going to notice it, or they're just going to be misinformed. Or if you have some knowledge of RVing, you can just go through and recognize, a story that says while most RVs don't have garbage disposals, that was one I came across recently. Well, come on, no RVs have garbage disposals, so you can tell somebody to know what they're talking about.
Exactly.
We all are RVers. Gail and I my partner Gail, we traveled, it's been about 4 or 5 years ago. We spent 2 years on the road full time. Loved it.
Wow.
2 years, yeah. And then we bought a new house here in the Seattle area. And but then when the pandemic hit, we were happened to be in Arizona, and the pandemic hit was first detected at a nursing home just a few miles from us. That's where it all started, Kirkland. And we said, heck with this. So we just stayed out for 8 months total, went down, stayed in Arizona, and had a great time.
Tell me, Chuck, your audience skews older. You had mentioned that previously. Why does the older community, why do you think they are so attracted to RVing?
There's all kinds of reasons. Comfort. A lot of people plan for it for years. And then there's people like in California right now where they're going to be moving out of their houses because, State Farm and what is it, Allstate have just quit insuring homes for fires. Those people can't get insurance. They're gonna buy RVs, some of them, and they're gonna go travel. They go, heck with this.
Yeah, why do you think they're so passionate?
Because there's freedom. You can move around. You can meet new people. You can stay in new places. All the things that are promoted about RVing are all true. You can look out your window and see you can be by a lake or a stream, or you can be in the desert, and you can be at the ocean. And that's the appeal. People that buy RVs buy a dream. It's not a practical thing to buy. It's going to depreciate like crazy. It's a terrible investment, but they are buying a dream of being out there. I'm not, if they don't want to sit in their house and watch television all day, they can be out there and having these adventures. And that's the appeal. It's the freedom. And it's real. That's real. I think the dream is still there. I mean, I know I had it, and I've never forgotten it. I remember what it was like. It's like falling in love when you're young and you fall in love with a pretty girl or a handsome guy or whatever, that feeling. And it's the same with an RV. You fall in love with it, the idea.
Well, so you also love writing, and you're a prolific writer. Are you writing as much as you used to? Are you backing off on that kind of what is your writing schedule these days?
I write a lot of just news stuff. I spend more time editing than writing, but I still love to write. And I'm trying to, my daughter is now picked up, I'd say 80% of the really heavy, doing 80% of the heavy lifting on the, turns out she's a born writer, publisher, editor. She just loves it. And she's so much like me that way. I never expected it when she came to work for me 6 years ago. It's just been incredible watching her grow. And, it doesn't get any better than having to visit with your daughter or son, whatever, constantly, and have a common topic that you both are passionate about. So
you're a writer, you're an editor, you're running a business, you go RVing. I mean, you're staying really busy. Is this something that means a lot to you to constantly have this activity?
You know what? I can't do anything else at this point. I love it more than anything. I love to write. I love the game of publishing. Competition is when it's, as you said at the beginning, setting ourselves apart from that is something we talk about a lot, our writers, and that is just by being ourselves, writing first person, writing about our experiences and the news. Otherwise, we could just crank out stuff if I wanted to, using artificial intelligence all day long,
Right.
and earn more money. But I would rather not.
Definitely, definitely. So, what are some of your secrets to staying young, to keeping your mind sharp, and all of that? What are some of the tricks, if you will, that you have learned over the years?
Keep learning. If you're a writer, keep reading, reading, reading. You have to be lucky and have an interest, whether it's carpentry or painting or whatever it might be. If you love what you're doing, then you'll want to do it. And if you always try to be better tomorrow than you were today, which is an actual conscious thought I've had repeatedly through the years. Do you want to stop? You know, people say I'm going to retire. And it's funny, I went to dinner last night and there was a guy behind me, the table next to us, and he was assistant fire marshal, and he was retiring today. And his replacement was sitting there across, and his wife. And so we started talking about retirement. And then we started talking about the idea that you can't just retire. You have to retire to something. You can't just retire. What are you going to do? You know, what are you going to do with yourself? You can be bored out of your mind. Listen, if you like to play golf every day, then go play golf. Find something that you love to do, and it'll keep you.
Buy an RV, right, and go traveling. See the East Coast if you live on the West Coast. See the West Coast if you live on the East Coast. Yeah, exactly.
Hey, it's still a great way to travel.
It really struck me when you said it a few minutes ago that you've started to think more about making today better than yesterday. I think there's a tendency as we age to think that our best days are behind us, but we don't have to feel that way, do we?
No, I think you are taught that. I think when I hit 65, I thought, oh geez, I'm supposed to retire now. I can't just keep going and keep working. I've got to retire. That's what you do when you get to be this age. And I dealt with, I'd say, and I still say, I sometimes deal with a little bit of guilt about why, if you're so successful, why aren't you retired? And then I go, and then when I get that far, then I think, well, what I do? I'd rather write than play golf. I'd rather write than walk on the beach and, hold hands and, skip rocks. I love what I do. This guy last night, I said, the fire marshal, I said, what are you going to do? And he said, oh, I have so many projects. And this guy had all kinds of interests. So he was going to be perfectly fine doing all of his other stuff. He said he loved his work and loved the people, and he was 62 years old.
You got to do something to keep the meaning, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. Otherwise, what's the point if you get up every morning and you're going to go sit in front of the television and watch the news and
we can hear your voice that it doesn't seem like that's going to be you anytime soon, just vegging out and letting the days pass. Chuck Woodbury, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you. I've enjoyed it so much, and we will look forward to seeing more of what you're doing with RV Travel. Chuck's story is amazing and inspiring, isn't it? He's not letting anything slow him down. Are you letting age slow you down? Let me know in the comments if you're an RVer and what you love and don't love about it. I can't wait to read your stories.